two things as a background for our thinking. I like to feel strange life beating up against my own life. I like to realize forms of life utterly unlike my own. When my own life feels small and I am oppressed with it, I like to crush together and see it in a picture, in an instant, a multitude of disconnected, unlike phases of human life. A medieval monk with his string of beads pacing the quiet orchard and looking up from the grass at his feet to the heavy fruit trees. Little Malay boys playing naked on a shining sea beach. A Hindu philosopher alone under his banyan tree, thinking, so that in the thought of God he may lose himself. A troop of bacchanalians dressed in white with crowns of vine leaves dancing along the Roman streets. A martyr on the night of his death looking through the narrow window to the sky and feeling that already he has the wings that shall bear him up. An Epicurean discoursing at a Roman bath to a knot of his disciples on the nature of happiness. A Kafir witch doctor seeking for herbs by moonlight, while from the huts on the hillside come the sound of children playing and dogs barking and the voices of women and children. A mother giving bread and milk to her children in little wooden basins and singing the evening song. I like to see it all. I feel it run through me, that life belongs to me. It makes my little life larger. It breaks down the narrow walls that shut me in. And now, one other, and then we will be ready to work. Now, we are ready to look at something pretty special. It's a duck riding the ocean 100 feet beyond the turf. No, it isn't a gull. A gull always has a raucous touch about him. This is some sort of duck, and he cuddles in the swells. He isn't cold, and he is thinking things over. There's a big heaving in the Atlantic, and he is a part of it. He looks a bit like a mandarin or the Lord Buddha meditating under the bo tree. But he has hardly enough above the eyes to be a philosopher. He has poise, however, which is what philosophers must have. He can rest while the Atlantic heaves. because he rests in the Atlantic. Probably he doesn't know how large the ocean is, neither do you, but he realizes the ocean. And what does he do, I ask you? He sits down in it. He reposes in the immediate as if it were infinity, which it is. That's religion, and the duck has it. He has made himself part of the boundless by easing himself into the boundless just where the boundless touches him. The people of the Middle Ages were more like this duck than we are. They took life as it presented itself and ran it up in spires of Gothic. They crossed few oceans, but they floated on the sea of time. And the cat is more like this duck than we are. We can radio to the moon and get back a pip for an answer, but a cat can make a hearth rug, a haven in the infinite, or launch 4 kittens into life in a cracker box by the furnace, purring with pride because he has tuned in on cosmic waves. Man and the meaning of community. For some time, I have been seeking to find a way of thinking about the experience of harmony and order and community in human life. And the thing that has puzzled me has been the fact that persons who concern themselves about community, who work for community, again and again seem to be driven to establish some transcendent point of reference to which they relate in order to give to them courage and a sense not only of continuity but heart. And where there is lacking this transcendent point of reference, then it is very difficult for the individual human spirit who's concerned about community to keep from growing weary, getting tired, and often finally giving it up as something that is not essential to man's life on the planet. Now, I don't believe this, you see, so that I have driven my mind to see if there cannot be within the context of man's living experience the ground and the rationale for his concern about and his experience of community. This is the essence of my search. And I want to talk about how my mind works with reference to trying to find a clue to this issue, which for me is a very important and a very crucial issue, because as I live my life, I discover over and over again that I'm surrounded by so much that casts down, so much that makes for despair of heart, and often so little that uplifts and inspires. And yet it would seem to me that the thing that uplifts and inspires should be inherent in man's experience of life itself, so that it does not have to appeal to a dogma beyond us, as wonderful as any dogma that can lift the spirit may be. But there ought to be in man's experience of living his life and reflecting upon the journey of man on the planet, that will give him heart. And it is not therefore contingent upon the vicissitudes of his fortune or by the experiences that may contradict his search. Now I begin with one or two propositions, naturally. And the first is that in our thought about life, one of the simplest and for me the most profound observation is that life itself is alive. That's the first. That this is a living, pulsing, breathing dimension of experience. Well, you know that you are alive, and you know that your cat and your dog or your pet snake, that these are alive, and the person next to you may be alive. And the mind, you see, is so overwhelmed by all of these, how to say this, the mass attack of all of these particular expressions of vitality by which we are surrounded, that the simplest thing about life is overlooked. That it is life itself that is alive. That this is, in essence, a dynamic universe. And wherever there is life, there is some kind of structure of dependability, some inner logic that gives meaning and structure and viability and purpose, not in a metaphysical sense, but purpose in the sense that that is expressed when you notice that a house plant that you have finds a way to turn towards the sun without any guidance from you. I remember going out in front of our home once and seeing some men digging away at the place where the sewer was, the sewer pipes. And of course they're always doing this in cities. And I think there's something demonic about it, but there it is, and there's never any end to it. So I went out to see what was going on, and they had there was a ditch, and I noticed that 2 sections of sewer pipe had been exposed. And around these sections of pipe, there was a network of roots, just encased, so that you could not see the pipe. And then, where the joints were, I noticed that it seemed that the roots turned inward in a unique way. And being curious, I waited until they began to move these around, and I discovered that surely enough, some little eager rootlets had found a way to penetrate the joints and get inside the sewage pipe. And when the man took his sledge business and cracked the thing open, the inside of that section of the sewer was one mass of roots. And they came from a tree 300 yards away on the back of the lot. The roots had smelled this water and had gone under the basement of the house and found it. Now, purpose in that sense is what I'm talking about. This seems to be characteristic of the way life behaves. So life is alive. That's the first proposition. And wherever you see it, it's on the hunt for that which will nourish it, sustain it, and hold it. Now, with that general statement about life, I'd like to begin the heart of my idea. And it is here a working definition, because I think this is important. Community is an expression of life when the potential of that life fulfills itself. Now let me say it again. It's almost 8 o'clock at night, and you've had dinner, and we're moving quietly into 0 hour, and it's been a long day, and you'll be forgiven if you find that you're just having a difficult time to try to wander along with me, but you have my permission to take a nap. But do it quietly. Is all that I ask. And when you wake up, we will be sort of wandering along, working at this idea. So don't be embarrassed, because I'm not going anywhere until I'm through. I'll be right here working. Now, community then, in its simplest and most elemental form, is what happens when any form of life actualizes its potential, when within the tight circle that expression of life represents, it fulfills itself. Now, that's the building block. Now, the more complex the form of life may be, the more involved is the process by which that form of life actualizes its potential. And with the complex forms of life, such as man, even the notion of potential is itself dynamic, so that I am never sure at any given moment in time when I have actualized my potential, because I am always moving, growing, getting insight, so that it's almost like a mirage. That when I get there, I say yes. If I do that, then I have as a living thing, I have experienced inner harmony. But when I get there, I find that this experience simply opens up areas that still must be actualized before I can say that I have it. Now, with this notion then of community, this working definition, it would seem to follow that harmony, that inner togetherness, inner order that seems to be built into the process of individual expressions of life is the way life itself functions, the way it is structured. Now, to jump to my conclusion, when I am working for harmony, when I'm working for community, I am not going against the grain of existence, but I am supported by this, whether I bow my knee before an altar or recognize any object of transcendent devotion. I am supported in the quest for community by my experience as a living creature in a living universe. Now, if this is the case, and in addition I happen to be religious, then all the gross is net. But the religious dimension in this sense is not necessitous to the experience. This is what I'm saying. Now, we discover then that this notion of community is very present in the memory of the race, as manifested, for instance, in the creation stories, in the creation myths. It doesn't matter what culture, what tradition, where in time you come upon them. Essentially, when men raise the question, how did we get here? How did this human show get on the road? The answer in the race has always the same basic elements. in it. Let us begin then to illustrate it, the first proposition, with our own creation accounts as found in the Bible. At that far-off time, says the racial memory, there was a period when harmony existed between all living things, between man and the animals, all manifestations of life were harmonious. This is what Genesis says. And this is what the Babylonian myths, the American Indian myths, any of them, they all say the same thing. Now what happened? It was community in the sense of inner harmony, but community in which the predominant element was innocence. Innocence. And as soon as knowledge was introduced, and man lost his innocence, he was involved in guilt. So that one of the critical problems of education is, how can young people move from innocence to knowledge without guilt? And can guilt be stripped, drained of all of its dismal moral dimensions so that it becomes, in the quest for knowledge, an incentive? This is one of the critical problems of education. Now, when knowledge came, innocence was lost, and the order, the harmony between Adam in our account and all the other animals and creatures, this harmony was broken. But in the racial memory, wherever we touch it, it is an echo of a time when community was pervasive. When I was a boy, I went across the meadow to visit one of my chums. Well, as a matter of fact, my only chum, for very good reasons. And when I went, I started around the house, because always I met him in the backyard where we could shoot marbles. And as I came around the house, I heard a rap on the window pane, and I looked up, and his father was standing at the window, and he urged me to come around and come in the house through the front door. I did, and when I walked into the room where he was, he pointed out into the backyard, and here in the sand was my chum's baby sister, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, a crawling stage, sitting in the sand playing with this rattlesnake. Now they were having a very happy time. The snake would try to crawl away, she'd pull him back by its tail. she turned him over on his back, and he would get back, and then he'd try to get away. And they were just delighting themselves in each other. And my friend was around on the side where the path was, standing guard, and his father sent me out to stand on the other side. For what purpose? So that no one would come around and do what? Introduce into this harmony fear, divisiveness, so that the harmony would be broken. And as soon as the harmony was broken, then these two living things that were harmonious became enemies. 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 But implicit in the racial memory is the notion of order, of structured community, but community of innocence. And the ethical problem that community creates in the light of that kind of racial memory is, can you move from community of innocence to community of responsibility? And survive. And survive. So, bearing in mind the working definition, community is the experience of any form of life when it realizes itself. And it may be stated in another way, that when life realizes itself in any expression of life, that expression of life experiences wholeness. And wholeness is community. All right. So when I despair in the midst of the disharmonies of contemporary life, I feel that life is on the side of harmony and life is against disharmony. Not as a religious judgment, but as a judgment, the content of which is the derivative from the structure of life itself. This is what I'm saying. Now, we'll take it another step. I think the experience of community is not only present in the racial memory, but the experience of community is inherent in man's experience as a creature on this planet, as a creature. For many years, the thing that has comforted me most in trying to work for and to live experientially into the meaning of community has been the contemplation of my own organism. My own organism. And it's curious, isn't it? It seems as if my body committed harmony to memory. My organism committed harmony. So that I become aware of some part of my organism when it is out of harmony. And the whole philosophy of therapy is the restoration to the organism of an original harmony. An original harmony. Now, only when my little finger can't little finger do I become aware that my little finger is out of harmony, out of community. And I do everything I can to restore it so that it becomes a part of this. Now, man's body then is a manifestation of a built-in organistic harmony with a kind of implicit, as we've discovered in later times, a kind of implicit command in the coding in the cell. Out of some 10 million cells in the body of a becoming baby, some cells become fingernails, some become eyebrows, each cell working on the basis of that which is inherent in the coding that's in the cell itself. And one of the problems of modern medicine is right here. We have built up defenses and therapies and cures, etc. Now, knowledge concerning these things sufficient so as to manage most of the disorders. See, word disorders that we call sicknesses, from things that invade the body from the outside. If doctors really wanted to, I'm sure they could cure the common cold, but it isn't worth curing. But they could. They know now enough so that they can deal with those things that invade. So that for the next 50 years, the whole problem of medicine and its relation to human sickness will be how to deal with those disorders, those unregulations within the community of the human organism. For instance, a friend of mine who's a surgeon tells me that if you have just a fraction of a liver left, that the body can build another liver. And when it gets to the right size, there's a cutoff, and it stops making liver cells. And because we don't know what the mechanism of the cutoff is, we can't stop the body from making cancer cells. But if we knew what the inner mechanism was of the cutoff, this is what I'm talking about. So that there is as a creature, as a human creature, I experience community in my body. There is a built-in harmony physiologically in my organism. Now, when I get ready to think in terms of the bearing that this has on my self-conscious activity, then I notice something very interesting. And that is that it seems to be the nature of the mind to think always in terms of an inner order. We say it in this way, that things must make sense to the mind. That, and it may be, if I may just let my mind play around with the notion of just a little, that it just may be, you see, that for a long time as we were developing through these millions of years on this planet, that the mind could not be separated from the body. That we had body-mind, but not mind as any separate entity. And perhaps the mind became separated from the body in a very interesting way. And just let our imagination play with it. Suppose, you see, there was a time when our forebears had to spend all of their energy just trying to stay alive. You know, they didn't have any built-in external things to keep them from being attacked by these various creatures. So they had to live in trees, so the rumor goes, because this was safe and it gave them a view all the way around, view from Hadrian's Bridge. And suppose one day one of our ancestors decided he wanted to give his little boy a birthday present. And he knew that the most delectable present he could get was a certain kind of dinosaur egg that could only be found about 20 miles over on the other side of the prairie or the valley. So early in the morning he goes out to find this thing, and he finds it and he starts back home, and he's tired now. So he sits down to rest under the shade of a rock. And after he settled in, the rock began to move because it was one of these monsters having a siesta. So he was chased all the way across the prairie, and the trees seemed to be farther and farther away rather than closer and closer. And he noticed something that he'd never seen before. There was an opening in the side of the hill. He'd been over that way 1,000 times, but he'd never seen it. And he darted into that opening, and the opening was small enough for him to get in and too small for his pursuer. And when he got in there, he said, "My, this is pretty good. Now, if I can manage some way to seal it up. So the things that are small enough to get in here can't get in here without my seeing them first. Then this is a new home. So he went to his tree and brought his family down and put them in there. And the word went from treetop to treetop. You don't have to live in trees anymore if you can find your opening in the hills. Now think of it. Think of it, what happened. Think of it. All the energy of the organism was spent in just staying alive. Now, with a cave, it was no longer to spend all of this energy in the business of staying alive. This energy became surplus energy. And thus imagination was born. And the mind now could begin to float up in detachment from the organism. I had a dream when I was a boy, and that was that I would